And when you hear about application service, then you can basically translate into what Rails community has been calling a service offering. So don't feel intimidated. You probably used or read about service objects in Rails already. So that's what application service is. And it's there to basically load data from database, to create like instantiate adapter or domain services. It provides all the plumbing, all the necessary things to put things in motion. So it's like, let's read things from database, let's provide adapter to an aggregate, let's call the right method like supply or ship, and then when the operation is finished in memory, we do back, we call save, and we put it back into database, probably using repository. So that's basically it, and I'm not gonna talk too much about it because this is what probably you've already read about service objects. And there is not really, in the DDD community, in application services, there is not really a lot of intelligence or business logic. We don't put business logic there, we just put there all the necessary infrastructure to put things in motion. So reading, saving, communicating with APIs, and that kind of things. Domain service, on the other hand, is something that contains business logic, which you didn't find a better place to, if I can say it like that. So you have all the aggregates, they have some logic, and it naturally occurs there. It makes sense to be there. And you have some logic that you kind of don't know where to put. Let's see an example of such domain service. So in our system, we have invoices. And when invoices are issued or to be issued, we need to compute 5 days, 5 dates. So what is the last day, what is the invoice due at? When should it be paid at? When are we going to give you credit note that you did not pay this invoice? When are we going to release the tickets and seat that we reserved for you for the time to actually pay for it? And these 3 are not the same date. And 2 optional reminders where we would like to send you an email that, hey, we still haven't got your money. So we need to compute 5 days based on some logic. And the logic is basically here, and it operates on 3 dates, like what's the current day, when does the event start, and what country we are in. And basically the logic is like, you have 13 days unless the event is so soon that you can only have 3 days or less. So that's it. And it doesn't make sense to put that logic in invoice itself. It doesn't make sense to put that logic in counter or event. It does not belong logically to any 3 of them. It's something that we need to compute, but if the logic changes anyhow, if the days go higher or lower, the invoice basically does not care. And that what tells us that the logic does not belong really to an invoice. And that's what made me implement it as a domain service. So we provide 3 days, and it calculates based on that 5 days. And it's as simple as that. And the interesting thing here is that it's a stateless service, and it's a side effect free function. So if you provide the same dates, it always returns the same results. It does not query anything in database. It does not save anything. It's just a business logic extracted and a very simple algorithm. And we had a nice discussion with Andrzej whether we could extract those things as methods, and I'm not so sure Andrzej is very convinced, but the reason I left it is because it's an algorithm. So it goes from top to bottom, and that's why I was not so concerned that we didn't extract those methods. And then the testing is also quite easy. Because we don't read anything from database, we don't save anything to database, it's just a pure business logic. So we need to provide those days. And for simplicity, there is an ability to provide something that will return information whether a day is free or not. So usually computing whether a day is free or not can be quite challenging. It's different in different countries. You need to avoid Saturdays, Sundays, other holidays, and so on. But from the point of the algorithm, we just want to skip 3 days. So we only compute business days. So for testing, it's easier if we have a very simple logic, for example, like every 3rd day is a free day, and that makes testing this whole logic much simpler. And then we can see that, okay, normally it's 14 days, but if that last day is not a free day, then we need to go 1 day later, and so on. So that's basically it. The domain service is there to help you calculate something. In our cases, that was days, or for example, fees that some organizer needs to pay to us depending on business rules. Some organizers have separate terms. Some organizers have flat fees. Some have percentage fee. So the effect of that was that we have a service for just computing the fees. And that's basically it in this shortest section. Do you have any questions about it? Maybe about application services or domain services? Is that not clear? Or is everything okay?
We always have this call method to execute. So you've got some initialize to set up the state and then call to do the action.
Yeah, the initializer is there to pass dependencies, like the algorithm to calculate whether day is free or not in given countries, and call to keep giving us their results.
So there's only one service has only one action?
In this example, usually it goes that way. So because there's just one thing the domain service can do for you. It's just so by convention we use the method call. So in the simplest cases you can even change the whole service with proc. Yeah. And it will still work.
It's totally okay also to group service objects together into one class because you have the same plumbing belonging together. So different we just use this convention of separating in separate classes. Yeah. But it's totally okay to have one class and you have methods as service objects. Okay.
So if you have, for example, multiple operations on product, like we had in our exercises, and the product can be supplied or it can be reserved, so we can have a supply method and reserve method also on the application service, or you can do it in a way that you have only one method call, but you pass different commands. So later, after the workshop, you will get our book for free, if you don't have already, and there are examples where there is only one public method call, but it accepts different commands. So it can recognize that this is a reserve product command, this is supply product, but the implementation of how we handle those different commands is private. So there are some methods there, but they are hidden as private, and the public API is just called.
I mean, it's a matter of like taste, but in my case, I have like one service which is for all commands of specific bounded context, and another service for queries just to show the distinguish between commands and queries. So there are two separate. We have multiple methods, same plumbing for dispatching the commands and the querying with using repositories, but yeah, separate.
And just to repeat what Robert said, application services are the closest to what we in the Rails community know as service objects. Because in the last years in the Rails community, we've seen quite a nice change in terms of where the logic goes. So now many of us put the logic into service object. It wasn't really that common like 5 years ago, for example. So we are in a good transition, I would say, as a Rails community. And it's
but only if it comes from controllers.
Yes, yes. But the application service is like I would say, if you want to go DDD is the end goal. But then the service logic, the service object, they don't contain the logic anymore. Because with DDD we have more building blocks like aggregates, like sagas, like other places, and this just stays as something which is just doing the plumbing. It's a really thin layer, so it doesn't really do much. And although they share the same name, application service and domain service, as you can see from the definitions, they are not really very similar. So domain services are more like calculators, and application services are more like orchestrators, different roles.
Where do you interface with the params? Because that's where it always gets messy. You've got like, where used to be
with params.
Yeah. So you need to do some pre-processing on what you
So
get
what we usually do is we repackage them at controller layer to something that's expected by the lower layer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the controller has the params, and it can, for example, build a command. The command comes from lower layer.
Yeah.
It's from the service or from something. Like you have list of commands that you accept,
Yeah.
and then like okay, the lower layer services don't know anything about params. They get
So
commands.
command forms can return just command as the something to dispatch, for example.
So just build an object that the lower layer knows about and pass it down.
Would you wrap it in an actual object rather than passing the hash?
Yeah, we wrap it in the object. And the interesting thing there is that if you have a good library and you have accessors on that object, then you basically don't need strong parameters from Rails.
Yeah.
Because if there is something that you cannot set, if someone, for example, sent you an attribute that they can't set, then instead of using strong parameters, you would get an exception from command. Like it cannot set an attribute that's not there. So basically, you have predefined structure of what attributes can go down. And that kind of makes also sense if you have different roles that can set up different attributes. Just make different commands. This is for moderators, this is a command to update product for admin, and this is to, I don't know, reserve a product. So if admin can do more, just use a different command with more fields. And it just works. You don't need strong parameters at all.
And also application services, they, as the name suggests, it's application specific. So ideally, you don't want to reuse them that much. So if you have a mobile client and a web client, they might have similar use cases, but application is per application, so it's per frontend, for example. So that's the approach here. Is that the domain is the part which can be reused between different clients. So the mobile client will get to the domain anyway, but certain things are only application specific. So certain things can be done in a batch way because web does allow a batch form, for example. So application service does handle the batch form, while the mobile is more like task oriented, so you just do one thing at a time. So they will have different application layer. So the point of application layer is to be per application.
One question. If my case is that I need to consume one external API with information about my bank account, what will be the best place to put this, to format this information? Domain service, because if I have many application services, they will need to consume the same.
Yeah, so usually what we do in our projects is we have a concept of adapter objects. So you wrap the communication with this specific API with an adapter. And application service is actually good because this is actually the infra layer. Adapter is the infra layer. So the application service is the place which orchestrates the infra layer with your domain layer. So you can first ask the API using the adapter, and then based on the response, you do something with the domain.
Or you can pass the adapter
or
to
you can pass the adapter to the aggregate as a parameter, so that the aggregate, while doing its job, can call it. But that's you're in a shaky ground here because you don't want to have the result of aggregates being based like directly on just the API calls. So it's up to you. It's best to decide whether you want to call it before you enter the aggregate or in the middle of the aggregate.
Okay. So the task that we are going to be working on, this time we will not be working on the inventory. We'll be changing the code of the applications that you have in more or less 3 places. So we have the concept of a very small pricing service. And we want to implement a business rule that, okay, things should be 10% more expensive on Saturday and 20% more expensive on Sunday. So this is our pricing. We want to integrate it into the application. And basically the business logic is very small, and if you are not very puristic, you can mix the application service and domain service together. So you can, for example, get a product from database, apply the business rules of 10 and 20%, and return something back. But if you are puristic, you can make them separate. So one layer will be responsible for getting things from database, and the other layer, domain service, will be responsible only for making the prices different. And in very simple cases, the coupling is not that hurtful. So you have things in one place which act as application service and domain service together, but the logic is so small that it does not hurt you a lot. But the more complex is the logic, the more rules there would be, for example, about pricing, and the businesses usually get more and more complicated, the more I would try to separate them. So one place is responsible for getting all the data necessary from database, and the other place, assuming it has all the data from database somehow, is responsible for calculating the rules. And then you can test the rules without reading anything from database, really. So I left it up to you to decide whether you want to separate those things or couple them together, because that's such a small requirement so far. So that's the task number 17.